Texas steps up big, correctly condemning trans surgery on children as child abuse. Democrat social justice warriors, meanwhile, screamed, cried, and threw tantrums, which clearly demonstrates that trans surgery on adult Democrats is the same thing as trans surgery on little kids. Child abuse. I'm Dr. Duke, she's Katie, and this is The Dr. Duke Show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Dr. Duke Show, the only program that keeps you educated on the craziness impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses around the world. Today's show is sponsored by Mike Lindell and our friends at MyPillow. MyPillow is always offering great deals, and this week they're going back to their roots, offering their premium MyPillow valued at $70 for just $30. All you have to do is use the code Dr. Duke, D-R-D-U-K-E. Visit MyPillow.com. You'll save up to 66% on all their other wonderful items as well. Again, the code D-R-D-U-K-E. All right, today we start in Texas, where the state's Department of Family and Protective Services just announced that performing any kind of transgender surgery on a child is in fact child abuse and should be treated as such. And way to go, Texas. This is an absolute no-brainer. I hope they'll take the next step, which would be a real big deal, and ban hormone therapy on children under the age of consent. And I would put that at 18. These children don't know what's going to happen to them. They just don't, we have no idea what's going to happen to them in 20, 30 years. It's too big a responsibility. We don't let them vote. We don't let them smoke cigarettes, for God's sake. We don't let them drink beer. We don't let them drive. We're going to let them decide on life-altering hormone therapy at the age of 10, surgery at the age of 13. It's a big mistake. And Texas leading the country the right way once again.
So it was the Texas Department of Family and Protective Service that found performing any type of transgender surgery was a child abuse. And then Texas Governor Greg Abbott declared also that putting kids through transgender surgery is abuse. He actually tweeted out, gender mutilation of a child through reassignment surgery is child abuse.
I love
that comment was coming from Commissioner Jamie Masters from the DFPS, but Greg Abbott tweeted it out for anyone who is maybe listening and not watching.
Yeah, and I love genital mutilation. Think about the horrors of little girls being genitally mutilated in places like Africa and Islamic countries where they're having their clitorises sliced off as their infant babies so they don't experience pleasure from sex, because that would be a bad thing in some of these religions. And so when he calls it what it is, this is genital mutilation. This isn't about alteration. This isn't body positive surgery. This is mangling nature itself.
And his tweet continued then with his own words, saying that the determination and subsequent enforcement of Commissioner Masters' conclusion are effective immediately. And that's the big thing to note. It's effective immediately. Texas is finally taking action, saying, you know what? Your kid may think a boy is a girl or a girl's a boy, but until they grow into being an adult, when they can make those decisions for themselves, they should not be getting any type of surgery for it.
This is going to sound weird. It's too bad we're using children for this experiment. Can you imagine if we had some other way of testing this? Let's say we had sentient monkeys, or we had high intellectual dolphins or something, and we did the same thing. I'd love to see a study for this. But you can't do it with little kids. But if you had some other way to test this, I would like a test done to see how suggestive gender is. These kids, or in this case, the dolphin group or the control group, the monkey group, the control group, would be hearing from teachers about how, you're really more advanced as a person or as a creature if you recognize how fluid gender is. And we know for a fact that it's heroic to come out and change your gender and change your pronouns. I wonder just how much of what's going on with our kids is actually suggestive, right? All the information, all the propaganda, getting them so young and feeding this to them, drag queen story hour, all this attention, positive attention paid to kids who change their gender, and all those boring monogender people are considered to be not just neutral, but having thousands of years of oppressing these brave young trans kids. I wish we could do some kind of a control group. We can't, because, can you imagine doing that? Getting a bunch of kids in the classroom and having half the kids giving them all this gender stuff and the other half radically not, and being able to compare the two of them. But see, that I don't use kids for these kinds of sadistic tests. The progressive left, they sure do.
Well, and we already know there's plenty of examples out there on TikTok and Facebook and Instagram and all of that of what these parents are doing to the kids. It's not the kids necessarily who wanted to do this, but the parents saying, well, you do like being a boy, right? Even though it's a girl.
Speaking of Texas, isn't that famous case in Texas where the dad was suing
I don't know I don't remember where it was, but it's still going.
Texas.
It's still ongoing.
It's still fighting. As a matter of fact, I saw that the dad just had some of his visitation rights taken away. And the child is living exclusively with a mother who is a pediatric doctor, by the way, who wants to see this child become a girl. And yet, whenever the child is with daddy, and we actually have video of the little child telling his father, "Mommy makes me do this." Right? I don't want to dress that way. It's just a really crazy mess.
It really is. But I just want to get back to
Texas.
Well, back to Texas, yes, but back to what Masters had said. Again, Masters is the commissioner of the DFPS. And for all the people who may be saying, yes, but there really are cases where, there's, both genitalia are present. So how can you deny them that surgery or whatnot? They say, Masters laid out the narrow cases, very, very narrow. Even in the great state of Texas, it's very, very narrow, in which surgery on a child's genitalia may be medically necessary. Again, if the boy thinks he's a girl or the girl thinks she's a boy, that's not medically necessary. No. And that then would not constitute abuse, the very narrow parameters. Masters said it may be warranted for the following conditions, including, but not limited to, a child whose body parts have been affected by illness or trauma, who is born with a medically verifiable genetic disorder of sex development, such as the presence of both ovarian and testicular tissue, or who does not have the normal sex chromosome structure for male or female as determined through genetic testing. Okay, so this is not just we're just going to put this out there and try and make it so it's against all the transgenders out there. No, this is medically what you would do. They're going about this in the proper form, where you take things, you think about them, you look at science, you look at data, and then you make determinations. I know this is like a foreign concept in this day and age, but this is what they're doing in Texas, so good on them.
We will look back on this someday, and not in the near future, within the next 20 years, and consider this a generation of children who were held hostage and then mutilated against their will because they don't have the will. And you think that the suicides are going to lessen now because we've made this culturally available? No, it's going to get a lot worse.
Well, and this is not causation, but the correlation here, the simple fact that we have all these kids with all the transgender things going on, you have suicide rates increasing, you have our kids not getting any education whatsoever, they can't read and write. These things all go together in some fashion. So when we look back on this generation, I'd say a whole generation at least, you weep for the future. You see this generation growing up in what they could have been and what they are becoming instead.
Well, this is a good place to talk about this briefly. It's the generation of parents that made handicap and disability heroic. We've talked broader in this culture about how victimhood became from the baby boomers forward, right? To be a victim in America was to be the real hero, and that means you don't have to get over your victimhood, because the victimhood is the heroic thing. If you get over your victimhood, like Clarence Thomas did, well, then you're part of the oppressive majority, right? So being a victim and staying a victim. Now I think you got, for the first time with this transgender stuff, is the culture of handicap/disability heroism. And so going through this gets you a lot of attention in the short term. It makes you a princess or a prince. It allows you to stand out. You're immediately tallied brave. Bruce Jenner became Caitlyn Jenner and gets the big award for that, right? A 60-year-old man going through surgery to transition is more important than little kids surviving cancer now. Think about that for a second. The ESPN award went to the 60-year-old guy with a lot of money who had his privates altered. That's about it. When you got real people struggling against diseases that are fatal. So get ready for a lot more of this. 20 years from now, we're going to look back. This is going to be the generation whose entire life was taken from them by eager parents and social justice warriors.
All right, before we move on, just a quick reminder that the best way to access our content is to download our Freedom Project Media app. Simply search Freedom Project in your app store, and then you make sure you allow for notifications. Also, if you like listening to the audio podcast, we are available on Apple, Google, SoundCloud, and everywhere else. Now, let's see if the first domino is not the last domino to fall in our education system. And we're going back into Texas, where at the University of Texas, San Antonio, they're going to be starting their fall semester entirely online. So they are the first domino that is falling into the we can't go back in person trap. Now, there was an email that was sent to their staff, faculty, and of course the students that said because of the COVID fears, at least the first 3 weeks will be online. As the letter states, unfortunately, the Delta variant has proven more contagious than previous strains, escalating risk levels to the severe level in San Antonio. Just that sentence alone is trying to scare the living crap out of you.
And do you see how unscientifically arbitrary this is? 3 weeks. What is the point of 3 weeks? How'd you come to 3 weeks as your starting point? Because you couldn't go half a semester? You couldn't guarantee that the kids wouldn't be in class? Because you know as well as I do at the colleges, the more you restrict, the more you write off a semester to online learning, 3 to 5 to 7% of your student body is going to walk away right away. So you go with the opening 3 week gambit, right? Because that's enough to push this into the future, gives you enough time to look around and say, oh, this is even worse than we thought. But it's not so much time that a student on the walking the line between staying home or going to college in the midst of all this nonsense would necessarily immediately drop. They're so, I hate to say this, but it's true. The calculation here is about money, not health. It's as it always is. It's about money, it's revenue, it's about student tuition fees and lunch plans and parking passes. All that stuff is determining this much, much, much more. And think about this too. 3 weeks into a semester in most universities is the date by which you could no longer drop classes.
Oh.
So conveniently, right? You're waiting it out the 3 weeks to see what's going to happen. Now if they do or don't, which they probably won't let you back on campus, and you want out, too late for that now.
Well, and we're not talking about this now, but we will be talking about it, I'm sure, in the very near future. The same thing is true at the K-12 level. They need the third Friday enrollment. That's right. The number they care about.
Yep.
They just want everyone in the classroom, Friday enrollment, and then poof, gone, because then they don't care. They have their money. That's what they need.
And you imagine, there's no doubt about it, these teachers unions would love it if 60 million kids showed up for until that third Thursday, and then everybody, 50 of them could go. 50 million of them could go. We got paid for the year, and guess what? It's vacation time. Now, they wouldn't have quite the impact. Critical race theory there would lose its target audience, but I think seriously, I don't think the unions would give one rat's rip if that's how it played out.
Now, the letter email that was emailed out, it was actually co-signed by the university's president, Taylor Agme, the provost, Kimberly Andrews Espy, and the chief financial officer,
it was
the CFO, named Veronica Salazar Mendez. And they did give 2 principal adjustments to the college schedule. 2 principal adjustments, they're calling them. Number 1, most courses will be held online for the first 3 weeks of the semester. And number 2, a mandatory COVID-19 testing requirement will be put into place for students, faculty, and staff. Well, isn't that so kind to them? Because take a look at what your university is doing. Most every one of them is doing something along these lines at this point. And as soon as, we're calling this, is this the first domino to fall, as the College Fix questioned, as soon as one does it, the purpose then they're like, oh, okay, this is what we'll do. Oh, okay. They're like college kids cheating on their tests, looking at the other.
That's right.
What are you doing? What do you got over there? Okay, this is what we'll do.
The purpose of stacked dominoes is to make them fall, right? Nobody sets up a domino play set all across, all scattered, unless you're going to knock them over. Of course is the first step, right? By definition, my prediction is by within about 10 days now, you're going to see what's already you've been led up to. My university, up to 2 weeks ago, this is a safe place. We know that college campuses are some of the safest places, but we're monitoring. We're monitoring.
What does
then
that
last
mean?
week,
Who's
masks.
monitoring? Oh, you got masks?
Yeah, oh yeah. Last week now, everyone's got to wear masks. You watch. Now, if it's bad enough that people have to wear masks, they were saying last week, we're going to make you wear masks, but we're going to actually have live classes. Now, how do you square that circle? If it's bad enough that I have to wear a mask, then when I tell you I'm not going to campus, I'm scared, I'm afraid, I'm going to stay home, I'm going to do class in my slippers and my fuzzy pajamas, my flannels, right? Mm-hmm. And not have to pay your parking fees and not have to, commute and get all that stuff. You're telling me now it's bad enough to wear masks, but I can't stay home. How much do you want to bet within 10 days, live classes become optional live classes?
Oh, I'm sure. Well, and hey, here you go at the University of Texas, San Antonio, where they did, when they said, most courses, it basically means all courses will be online. They said the temporary change directly impacts the face-to-face instruction portion of these classes scheduled for traditional in-person or hybrid modality, which will be held online at their regularly scheduled times. So I think they probably did the same thing as what your school did, where it's, okay, well, maybe what we can do is we can have class in person. Okay, no, then we would need masks. Okay, what if we do hybrid? Okay. At this point, let's just put them all online. And that's where your university is somewhere in the middle right now. They're getting to that point.
I go to the university, in case you're wondering, the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh, that starts late. It doesn't even start until after Labor Day. I bet you UT San Antonio is going to be starting here in the next week or two. So we're unusually late in our going, what is it?
August 23rd.
August 20th, the next week or so, yeah, 10 days. So it's exactly what's going to happen down the road. So what we're going and we by starting late, we'll have the benefit of saying, look at all the other schools have done it. At that point, how mad can you get, right? Dominoes have fallen.
One more thing, just so you know what the plan is, because we've got to know what the plan is. They said 3 weeks. Now, the plan is to keep these measures in place, quote, until we see the Delta surge begin to diminish and return to less risky levels similar to what we expected earlier this summer.
Or,
end quote.
Until the Lambda strain makes us burn the schools down altogether.
This is, yes, until we see the Delta surge begin to diminish. One, define every single one of those terms. The surge, where, when, what constitute an actual surge, and return to less risky levels. What are less risky levels? What does that mean? FYI, the Indiana school children are not in public schools. Just a little FYI for you. And actually, it's what we're talking about this whole next story, because according to Chalkboard Review, thousands of students are leaving the public schools to attend private or homeschool options in the state of Indiana. And of the 319 private schools with availability of enrollment data, it was looked at from this upcoming school year. 319, just remember that number, 319 private schools. 288 of them, of the 319, 288, that's a big number, have actually seen growth over the last 3 years. And of those 288, 154 of them have seen an enrollment leap from last year to this year. I just don't understand why. Why is it that in the past year, a lot of these private schools have seen a leap in enrollment? Dr. Duke, please inform me.
Who's your educational daddy? See what I did there? Hoosier? Get it? Hoosier? Who's your educational daddy? I think Indianans, and you got to say there's a lot of common sense in the land of John Cougar Mellencamp, the same state who actually was the first one to try to push back against Common Core. Unfortunately, you had unfortunately, you had Mike Pence as your governor who didn't get rid of Common Core. He just renamed it. But you fought the good fight, and here they are now. All my friends, they say, I married an L.A. darling, brought her to this small town, Katie. And now she's small town.
Wow. Just
like me. I think there is something, basic heartland, middle America wisdom behind this. And so the Indianans, the Hoosiers, have decided, well, if Muhammad won't come to the mountain, if they won't fix the schools, we're gonna walk away from the schools altogether. You keep it up, Indiana.
All right, well, back to the actual story here. Take a look at it this way when we do some math. I did a little math. First, of the 288, I was still getting into the data with that. 154 saw the enrollment leap of at least 30 students, which is an important note, because you're going to sit there and argue, well, duh, if they increase by one, oh, yeah, there was a leap, sure, one more kid. No, at least 30 kids per school. And these are private schools, again, not public schools, which welcome the masses. It's private schools, which are much smaller. in general. Now, of the schools that were looked at, 49 saw enrollment of at least 150% over the previous year's roster. So that's, again, percentage-wise. But look at it this way. From 2000 to 2015, over the course of 15 years, it's very common for a private school, a Christian school, that has under 500 students total to maybe fluctuate 10 students a year, okay? That's just, you look at the data, the trend is about 10 students, give or take. But in the last couple years here, especially this last year, they saw enrollment jumps of 25 to 50 students. And if you have less than 500 to begin with, 25 to 50 kids is actually a big jump. And so that's kind of exciting to hear. And of course, suburban schools are seeing a lot of the influx because they're escaping what's happening in the bigger cities, going out to the burbs, where several private and Christian schools in suburban areas of Indiana saw astronomical climbs in student enrollment. In one case,
Good.
In one case, a Christian school in Greenwood, Indiana, I'm not sure where in Indiana that is, but in Greenwood, they recorded 320 students back in 2019-2020. And so far, just for this upcoming year, they're at 551.
Gosh, you mean suburban moms aren't going to sit back and let their white kids be called racists and slaveholders and privileged manipulators of culture and destroyer of everything good and decent in minority communities? You mean suburban moms have a choice and they're exercising it? Amen.
And the same thing is happening in a Christian school in Lafayette, Indiana, where 270 students they had in September last year, and now they're registered so far 328. That's, again, percentage-wise for a small school, if you know what it takes to get a school organized, get students enrolled and all the process and everyone on the same page, that's a huge jump. And I guess in conversations with the admissions staff, it was discovered that some of the schools have begun placing new student candidates on wait lists. So the kids are having to get put on wait lists. It's like daycare, let me tell you on that one. The wait list because, too many kids are clamoring to get in because they actually just want to get an education. That's all they're asking for.
We are going to Peter Paul Rubens. No, he does not make candy, nor is he related to Pee Wee Herman. He is one of the great Flemish painters of all time. Born in 1577, died in 1640. He was a Baroque painter, which has wonderful connotations, sort of a counter-Reformation in some ways painter. And his paintings are, if you see a Rubens painting, you'll never forget it. He painted like nobody else ever really did. Take a look at the first painting. We did this once before in the Dr. Duke Show. And I thought, because we're going to dedicate a whole week to Rubens, I thought we would start again with this. This is the Honeysuckle Bower. This is a beautiful outdoor autobiographical painting. That's Rubens on the left, his wife, Isabel Brandt, on the right. And they were married about 1630, and you can see the elaborate costuming of the day. But unlike so many painters we talked about Vincent van Gogh a couple of weeks ago, we talked about other paintings as well. This guy was so prosperous and so good at his job that he was never was your starving artist. He never was living in a garret. He didn't die in broke poverty like his contemporary Rembrandt did. What an amazing career he had. He was well in demand. He was a ambassador. So important was he to his country that his king named him an ambassador to other nations of Europe to try to prevent war. And so here you have him and his young bride, and this whole picture shows confidence, wealth, love. It's a honeysuckle bower. The fact that their right hands are joined together, that was a symbol of married fidelity. You get just the way they look directly into the camera, the beautiful honeysuckle, like I said before, which is a symbol of love and fidelity too. The garden scene that you see there, just a really, really nice painting of the kind that you almost never see paintings. When you see painters painting autobiographical pictures, self-portraits, it's almost always in whimsy or despair. It's almost always in poor circumstances, with oddly contemplative looks on their face, puzzlement. But here you have nothing more than really suburban opulence and wealth. It's a neat change. And over the next week, we will consider some of the more important paintings of Peter Paul Rubens.
Well, all right. If you enjoy our content, please consider joining the Patriot Club. Your one-time $99 tax-deductible donation allows us to keep bringing you stories every day. Simply visit patriotclub.us to get signed up. That's patriotclub.us. And of course, we will ship you our signature tumbler as a special thank you. Now, before we go, let's show some love to our Patriot Club members. And today, we're giving a shout out to Liz from Red Granite, Wisconsin. Liz in Little Red Granite drove by there last weekend, I think it was. Thank you for supporting us.
Very picturesque little Wisconsin community. Thank you, Liz. We do very much appreciate it. And that's our show. For Freedom Project, I'm Dr. Duke. She's Katie. Until next time, stay educated, my friends.